Oh, I did it again. I keep doing this thing where I forget to take off the front panel. Hi, everybody. I'm back, and I've got the amazing Diana Helmuth with me, and we are going to be talking about something really fun today. So usually when we have guests on, they're like, they've been around for a whole minute. They're not going to necessarily share the nitty-gritty details about why they wanted to become a witch as an adult and not like, as a teenager and stuff like that. So I'm super excited, and I really enjoyed your book because it was honest. And these are like, you're talking about things that when I had a store, I would have these really deep conversations with people about their process, and we would get, into some heavy stuff. And then of course, having this show for 13 years, we've had a lot of people come and go with a lot of very similar experiences to what you've gone through and the stuff that you talk about in your book. So I'm particularly excited to have you with us. So everyone, welcome to the show, Diana Helmuth. How are you doing today, Diana?
Good. Like I said, we're in an excessive heat warning where I live right now, so I'm trying not to melt, but I am really thrilled to be here and be on the show and to talk about trying to turn myself into a witch for a year.
Yeah. So, okay. So you wrote a book that was about surviving in the wilderness, right? Like how to be comfortable, like while you're outside, right?
Yeah.
And this was a long time ago. And then you have this inspiration to talk about one of the, like, it is one of the weirdest things ever to become a witch. Like, it's just true. So let's start at the beginning, okay? Because it's a really great book, everyone. Let me put this up on the screen real quick. So The Witching Year, it's a phenomenal book. You have some really great praise that come from the book as well. Some excellent people. Yeah. I mean, incredible on that, by the way. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. So you woke up one day and you're like, hey, I want to be a witch. But I know there's more to that. So let's get into like the stuff that precedes that, because you end up having a really interesting conversation with your mom. And that's what kicks off the book with the countdown to day one. So let's talk about what on earth possessed you to join the Weirdo Club.
Well, I mean, first, thank you for the praise. Now I'm just like reeling with flattery, but I will try and focus. So, let's see. Well, so I grew up in Northern California, and you live in Northern California, right? And when you're out there, you get a little bit of witchcraft exposure, right? It just comes up. I had friends in high school who were reading Silver Raven Wolf and doing tarot and, looking up their astrological charts and all of that. So I was a little bit familiar with witchcraft. I was one of these people, and I think a lot of people of millennial and Gen X especially feel this way. I was raised with this idea of religion is bad. And if you are religious, it's almost like you're stupid. I'm being extraordinarily blunt here because I think that's what a lot of people felt in their hearts. There was this messaging of that. And to be intelligent was to be an atheist. And so I have little occult framings around parts of my life growing up, but I never get into it because I am intent on being smart, and I am intent on being skeptical and displaying my smartness through my being skeptical of anything related to religion or divinity or spirituality at all. And of course, whether or not witchcraft is a religion is a whole debate, and I'm not going to get into that right now. I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying I'm not going to get into it right now. So hopefully nobody comes for my throat with that one. But during COVID, like a lot of people, took a good hard look at my life and things I liked about it and things I didn't. And bizarrely, one of the things that came up was I was tired of God being dead. God is dead. Okay. And I realized I was tired of that fact. And then I had some friends who were witches, and I'm talking to them about this, and they say, well, have you ever tried witchcraft? And I go, no, why would I do that? And they say, because you're in charge of it when you do it. It's not that someone is telling you what to do and how to think and how to believe in God and how to act this way and then automatically be in a good place after you die. And these are all things that you carve for yourself. You are becoming the captain of your own spirituality. And whatever that looks like for you gets to be what's real. So I thought, I don't know, this all just seems kind of dumb stuff. I couldn't get over it. I couldn't allow myself. I wanted to be comforted by the divine, but I had trouble allowing myself to actually do that. I had trouble being comfortable with the fact that I wanted that, just to be blunt. And then Lauren Parker, who becomes one of my witchy mentors in the book, and she lives in Oakland. She's a Bay Area witch as well. She she said, "Well, why don't you just try it for a year and write about it in a book?" And I said, "Okay, that could be funny." And so to make a very longer, complicated story short, that's what we did. And when I'm telling my mom, she was like, to actually bring it back to answer your question, she's like, "Are you going to start worshiping Satan?" So I'm trying to make this palatable to her because she's pretty open-minded, but I could tell she was really worried about me. And because I had written a book about backpacking, I was like, "No, I'm just turning hiking into church," and that mollified her. I got her
Yeah.
off the back.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
Christopher Penzick has a story about when he first got interested in studying witchcraft, and he went to his mother and he was explaining to her his interest, that she was, concerned, right? And so
Right.
she went to the first class with him. Like, she went to the first set of classes with him to make sure that he wasn't like getting into anything crazy. Moms are good. Moms care.
That's actually sweet.
It is sweet.
I
It's
think,
so sweet.
I mean, overbearing perhaps, but ultimately very sweet.
Yeah. Hey, she became a witch too, so they both ended up walking away witches out of that experience. So,
I believe that.
yeah, right. So I appreciate that idea that first of all, that you're able to have those levels of conversations with your mother, like that's a big one.
Yeah.
And then second of all, that you were in a place where you were feeling like God was dead. I really love that term, only because of what it evokes inside of us when we really meditate on it.
Right.
And I think as a witch, that's exactly what the goal is in our own way to kind of revive our own godhood. And this book is full of that journey. I also want to say it's one of the most well-written books. Like, you have beautiful prose. It's nice. It's cool because, again, most of what we read is like the books I write. Like, we are very nonfiction. We're very more how-to. And this is a really heartfelt exploration and a story. And we're not learning technique. We're learning how to survive. And I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
So you go through that whole moment of, "No, Mom, I'm turning hiking into church." So I love that. So do you differentiate? Like, how do you feel? Because you're hitting, like, when I'm going through your manuscript, when I was reading it, you've got all of the references of, like, no, these are the big writers. These are the people you want to be reading. These are, like, in my opinion. So I'm going to ask you, did you differentiate Wicca and witchcraft, or did you just see them as like one thing?
That's a really good question. And those were some of the hardest sections of the book to write. And I wrote them and I rewrote them. And as I was writing them, I realized I was processing my own understanding of history and also my own feelings between the differences of Wicca and witchcraft, right? So I wanted to start with Wicca because, I'm a white American, I'm of European ancestry. Everyone's like, "Go back to your roots." I'm like, okay, well, what's there? Oh, well, someone already made this religion based off of old European myth and magic and packaged it up, and asterisk, 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 how accurate is it? How much was stolen from Buddhism? Like, you can't Gardner, the whole thing. But I started with Wicca because it felt like a container. Witchcraft felt huge, and Wicca felt like it had a nice little box I could step into and say, "Okay, I'm doing this now." And because it is a folk religion, there are so many authors, but my process was, and this is it's a little tongue in cheek, but it's true. It's what I did. I really agonized over this. Rather than someone's definition of the best or the wisest, I just picked the most popular. What were the best-selling books? I bought them all, and I stepped in. And then I think around November, Meg Elison, who was another one of my witch mentors in the book, looked at my reading list, and she looked at me and she said, "What the fuck are you doing?" And okay, I don't know if I should swear on here. Sorry, but
by all means, yeah, dude, I do.
she was very sassy with me, and she said, "You're keeping yourself in the dark on purpose." And I said, "No, I'm keeping myself in what's most popular." And she was like, "Don't be stupid on purpose. It's not cute. Why are you doing this?" Because most people aren't Wiccan anymore. I mean, I would argue that Wicca has had the greatest impact on the modern witchcraft movement
Mhm.
in the West.
Yeah.
People might not like that, but I believe it is true, whether we like it or not, whether it's good or not. It's just true.
Mhm.
And when most people practice witchcraft, if you're in the United States, you're dealing with stuff that probably Gerald Gardner initially planted the seeds on, and
Mhm.
arguably he stole this from someone else, etc. But
Yeah.
anyway, that's a whole different
No, yeah, I mean
story.
that's the way the cookie crumbles.
Well, so that's what I discovered when I stepped into witchcraft. I moved away from Wicca around November, and I wanted to dive big into witchcraft. So I'm looking up books with witch and witchcraft in the title that are the bestsellers, again, because
Mhm.
that ocean was huge and I didn't know which fish to pull out of it. So it's a folk religion. I did the popularity contest, and all the authors were still Wiccan except for one, but she was still kind of basically Wiccan. Like I was like,
Mhm.
oh, I thought I was going somewhere new, and I'm not. And that's actually what crystallized for me the difference between Wicca and witchcraft, which is witchcraft is bigger and broader and doesn't have a lot of boundaries. But I do think if you're a witch starting to dabble today, you're doing Wiccan stuff, kind of,
Mhm.
whether you'd have to try pretty hard actually not to. I'm not
Mhm.
saying everyone is. It's just it has
That's what's
colored the
available.
landscape.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's like the soil, it's yeah.
Mhm.
So
Absolutely. Do you find I totally appreciate you being you're so high vibrational as you're navigating that answer.
I'm really afraid of people telling me
The
I'm a moron.
Well, no, because here's the thing. On at least as far as my audience is concerned, we are all on the same boat that you get to define these things for yourself. That is your
Yeah.
God's given right. So
Yeah.
when we're discussing these things, I mean, the whatever your conclusions are, I mean, that's a big part of how you're putting this whole picture together.
Mhm.
And a lot of people are having the same kind of situation. So I think it's again great that you're sharing this level of detail
Thanks.
as you're coming through.
What
So okay,
well, I was gonna kinda ask, I don't know if we have time for this. What do you think, about
I
that
think you
same
said it
question?
perfectly well. Yeah, no, I there are because I've had this discussion so many times and I struggled with it in my own writing and things like that.
Yeah. It's
And
hard, right? It's
yeah,
tricky.
and when I came to the world of witchcraft, I was like a really young teenager,
Mhm.
and I would go to the bookstores and I would buy whatever I had money for, and do all. And it was always, well, what books were faced out, what books were
Right.
being promoted at the time,
Yeah.
and it was a long time before I was in a position where I could even discover that there were actually like old grimoires and stuff, and there were other
Yeah.
traditions besides. But you don't know until you don't know what you don't know until you
Sure.
get in, and then you're like knee deep, and you're going through the muck, and you realize like this may not be something that I want to necessarily be, part of in a full
Mhm.
context. It may
Mhm.
be something that I want to take pieces from. I think that a lot of modern witchcraft practitioners, regardless, have had to do that when it comes to Wicca because of the
Yeah.
influence that it had. And in the '90s and in the early like 2000s, like there was this whole campaign for people to stop calling us witches and to start calling us
Right.
Wiccans. And
Right.
so we can't like get angry at like the public or angry at society and culture for calling us Wiccan or getting that confused, because there was a whole campaign that went
Yeah.
on for over a decade
Uh-huh.
about sanitizing that because witch
Right.
was scary, and now we're embracing it. So
Right.
it's just this, and that's why I'm like, no, at the end of the day, like we're all allowed to come from our background and have our definitions and have our stuff. There are people who are in Gardnerian Wiccan traditions or Alexandrian Wiccan traditions.
Mhm.
They have their own thing. What Scott Cunningham wrote about is not that. But
Yeah.
because Scott Cunningham used the word Wicca, and because you had people like Buckland and Silver Ravenwolf and Margot Adler, just using that term, that's what stuck in the zeitgeist, and that's what became who we are.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I'm with you. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just one of those things, and again, I think again, if you are getting into it, you start to find that stuff out, but you just don't know what you don't know until it's time to know it. So it's
Yeah.
kind of one of those things. Who were your you're starting off and you have I'm going to assume you have like a little bit of knowledge about what you're getting into, or at least an idea of what you're getting into, and you're buying these books and you're reading all of these different opinions and thoughts and on the craft. Were there authors that you felt eventually helped you to kind of click your perspective, that helped you in your journey kind of rise
Yeah.
to that? And can I ask you who those were?
Yeah. I mean, I did read Wicca by Scott Cunningham, and I loved it. I'm not going to say it's a perfect book because it is also a product of its time. There's some kind of cringy stuff in there, some problematic things that I like to think Cunningham would have gone back and edited were he still alive today. But it's a really beautiful embrace. It's a book that wants to embrace you and wants to welcome you into this thing that feels really big and secretive. And at the time he was writing it, Wicca had been secretive. And I love he has this, I say he's the Bernie Sanders of witchcraft. He's just throwing open the doors like, everybody get in here. We're doing free healthcare for all. I don't care. Come on. It's too good. It's too good. Just get in. And I love that. So that was one of my favorites. I had Thorne Mooney was wonderful. Don Martin's book, The Dabbler's Guide to Witchcraft, I read often. It was because essentially what I was a dabbler. But one of the books that ended up having the greatest effect on me was a book, and I didn't expect this. It was a book called Brujas by Lorraine Montague. The very few people I feel like have read or heard of. She published it with a tiny press. It came out right in 2021. And to be perfectly honest, the only reason I found it is because I was looking, all my authors were white. I was looking for some perspectives on witches, from witches of color. And I also, I mean, I am white, but when you get into witchcraft and you start talking about ancestry and your shadow side, being white is tricky, especially if you're a white American, right? What did my ancestors do? It wasn't great, was it? Pretty much no matter how you slice it. And I was contending with a lot of white guilt. And I actually really didn't know how to work through it. It wasn't that I didn't want to feel it. It was just whenever I tried to talk about it with people, I felt like I was hitting walls. I mean, I wasn't trying to talk about it with people of color because I know that that's not really something you're supposed to do. But even when I tried to talk to other white people. So anyway, I get into that a little bit more in the book. Those were also some of the hardest sections to write. But Brujas by Lorraine Montague, it's that book is like an overview of the Bruja space in the United States right now. It's almost like a teeny tiny version of Margot Adler's Drawing Down the Moon, except she wrote it in 2021 and it's about the Bruja space as opposed to the grand neo-pagan space. It's also written much more accessibly, even though Lorraine is a PhD. But it reads like your kind of your average occult book, except for the fact that she is magnificent with words. It's written very, very beautifully, but it is accessible. You don't have to be a PhD. You don't have to be I love Adler's book, but it's stiff. It reads like a dissertation. Brujas does not. And there are many sections in there where she also dips into memoir, where Lorraine does in Brujas. And she's processing her own. She's Latin American, but she is also white skinned, and she's processing a lot of her own ancestry and guilt and what this means to be inside of a culture that has moved somewhere else. And she and I are not the same, and I have so much trouble articulating this when it comes up. I really need to write this down for when this question comes up in other interviews. But this book made me cry every 15 pages. I dog-eared every single page. This book healed me. And I emailed her about it and I said, I don't think you meant to heal me. I don't think you wrote this book for me, but it did. And I want to thank you. And now we're kind of friends, which is actually amazing. But I think some people would see this book and see that it's called Brujas, The Magic and Power of Witches of Color, and think it is only for Brujas and witches of color. And while it is for them first, I really think every witch should read this book. I mean, this book changed my life, and it just felt like a hug the entire time. It was incredible. It was the best book I read the whole year. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. And I
No
think it's
one's
also
paying me to
really
say that.
important.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's important to, I also think as people who are white, to get the hell
No.
out of our box and go read about something else.
Right.
Because at the very least, you get into these arguments where it's like, well, no, this is the way it's done. Well, they're not doing it that way. Why do we got to
Right.
do it this way? You know, so that kind of stuff is good to challenge paradigm and to challenge propensity and make sure that we're on the page that we need to be on.
Yeah.
And I again, I love that you're sharing this stuff. Thank you
Yeah.
for the recommendations. Everybody at home,
Exactly.
definitely check those books out.
Yeah.
Okay, so you go from more of looking for like the kind of traditions and looking at how things kind of compare and contrast as you're getting your feet wet and everything, and then you stumble onto something like chaos magic. And so what was it? So as somebody coming in fresh, right? So you've read all the stuff about Wicca and how these are, and then all of a sudden chaos magic. So what was that like? What were your thoughts? And what ultimately did you get out of your chaos magic leanings there for the time?
Well, chaos magic was tricky because I say this in the beginning, I approached witchcraft perhaps in a way not a lot of other people have. I approached it with, I was looking for structure. I was looking to kind of be told what to do. I was looking for divine comfort as a reward for following all the rules. And then I got to chaos magic in the spring, and chaos magic, how it was introduced to me anyway, was like, oh, you can just kind of do whatever you want as long as it's working and you're not hurting anybody. And the broadness of that freaked me out. I was like, I can't. I'm still just like trying to figure out Wicca. Like, could everyone just chill? But Lauren Parker is a chaos magician, and she was the one who said something happens in the book, and someone I know gets robbed, and I'm trying to get stolen property back from them or for them, and nothing I'm doing is working. And she comes to me one day and goes, "You want to summon a demon?" And I say, "Will the demon get my stuff back?" And she said, "It might help." And I said, "But you don't summon demons in witchcraft. That's kind of the whole point. The whole point is we're not Satanists. We're not summoning demons. Or at least with the Wiccans, we're very clear about that, right?" And she kind of said, "Well, that's the difference. So do you want to do something that will actually get results, or do you just want to, keep being a good little Wiccan?" So I do summon a demon, and I won't tell. I would rather people, if this can be a commercial for my book, I'll let it be that. But that was the primary time I messed with chaos magic, so to speak. I think, well, yeah, I'll leave it there. There's kind of,
did the demon get your stuff back?
I don't want to say.
You have to read the book. You got to read the book. You got to read the book. There we go. Okay, so then we get into this. So you go from structure, chaos magic, and then there's this really fun kind of trip into the idea of possibly taking a trip and what that would be, right? Using mushrooms to get, or drugs to be able to get a certain level of experience in the moment that you're looking for. And this question comes up, and this is something that we get asked all the time.
Yeah.
People all the time want to know, do I need to take mushrooms in order to get to X? And if I don't, then what do I need to do in order to get X without taking mushrooms or whatever? So I loved this section. And it's not a whole lot, but it's a nice little thumbprint in there. So I want to talk to you about this because, again, I get to have such a fun perspective with talking to you. So there's this kind of given bit when you get to September. I don't want to give the book stuff away too much here. You definitely got to read the book. But when we get to September in your journey, this comes up. So can we talk a little bit about what your experience is before you came to writing a book on witchcraft? Like, had you gone to a festival and seen a guy high on mushrooms on a hill spinning a flag, and you were like, that guy looks like, or was it, that you had no experience and you didn't know what that would look like? And so that idea of doing something like mushrooms was even extra scarier to you. What was that like approaching that subject? And why why would you have picked something like that over a different route?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and hopefully no drug enforcement officers are listening. It's a narc free podcast. I my experience with mind altering substances is a little mixed. I've been to some festivals. I've taken some things with great caution because I have a family history that makes me really nervous around basically addiction and also losing my mind. So I wouldn't say I'm the most experienced person in the world, but I've done enough things to know that. Well, yeah, I mean, I'll share this section of the book. At one point, I go into my backyard and I'm trying to get in touch with energy, as Thea Sabin describes it in her book, Wicca for Beginners. And she's saying you can feel it coming off of plants. And I'm like, I'm a hiker, I'm a backpacker, I'm a gardener. I have like 2 cabinets in my house dedicated to tea. Like, I'm going to be a green witch. I know that this is all just a formality, truly. So I go outside and I try and commune with my favorite plant. And it doesn't work. I cannot get this plant to do anything for me. And I try, and like, I'm genuinely trying. Like, half of me feels like a complete idiot. You know, I'm standing here with my palms out in front of an oregano, waiting for something zippy to happen, and just nothing is happening. The oregano is giving me nothing. I'm devastated. I'm embarrassed. And then I ask my friend about it, and she says, just take mushrooms. That plant will talk to you. And I go, yeah, it probably will. But I think it's important to do this sober. So why did I feel that way? That is an excellent question. Probably one part is fear. And one part, and I could interrogate this for a while at the risk of turning this into a therapy session. I don't really want to do that. But there's something about it that would feel like cheating, which is a weird thing for me to say because I do believe in substances giving us the ability to reach parts of our brain that we typically shut off. And I think that's valid. And I think arguably that can be extremely healthy. So I think the reason I didn't want to do it is because after that, everything would have had to be that. You know, there's a section later in the book where I'm trying to commune with a particular goddess, and I get to a place where I actually do feel like I'm on Molly without being on Molly. And that felt incredibly profound. And I think if I had taken a lot of drugs to have spiritual moments up till that point, I would have missed the profundity of that. With that said, would I go to a festival and take a bunch of drugs and be like, we're celebrating Dionysus tonight or whoever? Absolutely. But I think because I was new and unsupervised.
That was smart.
Yeah. Especially being unsupervised.
Yeah. I have this, I think on the rare occasion people can stumble into those experiences and it is spirit led and it is something very magical and mystical, but I think most of the time it's not. I think it really needs to be something that's done when you've got somebody with a little experience to kind of babysit, walk you through that stuff. Like there's in just psychedelic culture, there's already like protocols and things and you need to apply those. And I'm not, I mean, I am a mushroom fan, but I don't have a lot of experience outside of that with psychedelics because I'm not interested in those things. But I do know that as a witch and as somebody who is very into plants and things like that as well, that of course there's an experience there and it's something to appreciate. And you're right, it does help unlock aspects of our mind and that's very important. However, not the only way to get there. And so I'm glad that you had that internal guide to help steer you in a direction that didn't also like freak you out and make you run away in the opposite direction. Because that could also happen, right?
Well, yes. Maybe I was more scared of that.
Well, and there's that too, right? Because then things get real and a very uncomfortable. It's different. It's just different. Okay, so switching topics a little bit. So you get through the summer, you're sculpting this identity, and then we get to like Mabon, and which I love the way you describe Mabon. I'm not, it's perfect. But read the book, everyone. It's Mwah, chef's kiss.
Right.
So I like the way you describe it. But so we get through Mabon and then Halloween and Samhain, right? And so
Yeah.
I want to know what you were thinking, right? So you're like, I'm a witch. It's my first Halloween as a witch. Woohoo. And
Mhm.
then wait a minute, right? So what was this experience like? So just as somebody who I'm just gonna call you a muggle, right? You were a muggle, you did
Okay.
Halloween
Yep.
a certain way, right?
Yeah.
And then suddenly you switch to the witch hat
Mhm.
and Halloween is done a little bit differently. So what
Mhm.
was that experience like? Like, what were you thinking about? And was there anything that was shocking to you about the way we do things in the witch world?
Samhain for me was like violently emotionally brutal. Nobody hurt me. Nobody did anything to me. I did it all to myself. But I, having gone through, I well, you know, in the book, I basically show up to a stranger's house. They are witches, and I do a Samhain ritual with them. And they're wonderful women. They're very warm, and I had a very intense experience in this complete stranger's backyard with the goddess Hela and my dad, who passed away when I was 19. And having gone through that, it was cathartic, it was intense, it was beautiful. I when I was recording the audiobook for that section, it took us, I kept crying. We had to do it in so many takes. I was so embarrassed and I just simply could not get through it without weeping. So, just to give you a sense of how intense that experience was for me personally, we all have these experiences in our lives, these things that just these nerves that are just open. No matter how much we try and put something over them, they never get quite as healed as we might like. And you're like, don't touch that, just don't touch that one. And Samhain is just that entire nerve for me. So, um, I guess I still don't understand why witches love Halloween so much because I'm like, it's grief and it's death and it's pain and it's the new year and you're letting all this stuff go. And all of that is brutal. It's brutal. And yet every witch I know is like, oh my God, Halloween. And I'm like, I'm triggered by this entire month. Like I still can't get into
Right,
it.
right.
Can't do
I mean,
it.
it's absolutely catharsis. Like there's no question about it. That is a huge part of it. But one of my favorite to this point, one of my favorite things to talk about, and this is so cliche, and I'm probably like everyone's gonna stop watching after I say this, but Charmed, the original Charmed series,
Uh-huh.
there's a Halloween episode,
Uh-huh.
and I think it's called like Embrace the Cliche or something along those lines, but that's the message of it. The Hollywell sisters go back in time and meet the first witch in their line, and it's this whole thing, and they
Oh.
have to like save themselves.
Uh-huh.
And in it, the story for that episode starts off with one of the sisters feeling really resentful that she's got to wear a pointed hat, and all the witches have green faces, and we don't look like, it's one of those things.
Yeah.
And then by the end of the episode, you kind of get to this place where they realize like you embrace the cliches because they give you
Yeah.
power. So these things that we in culture and society are scared of, witches are always going to be something that goes bump in the night as far as the zeitgeist goes. And
Mhm.
so when we get to October, we get to step into that and play that role, and in a very cathartic way, but also in a revelatory, like, yeah, we're the things that go bump in the night, boo. And
Yeah.
that's something that is very empowering in the way that, like, I'm just going to say it, and the way that Pride Month empowers queer folk, right?
Mhm.
We get the same thing, and queer folk also get this out of October, so it's like two Pride Months, but
Yeah.
we get the same thing as witches and occultists kind of when it comes to October, right?
Mhm.
It's that stepping into that. And yeah, and I know a lot of witches who stay at home on Halloween, and there's resentment and begrudgingness, and then there's
Mm.
me, who I treat Halloween as separate from Samhain. So Samhain
Yeah.
is when I get all
Yeah.
religious and do all my stuff, but then Halloween is I am partying and I'm eating
Right.
way too much candy that is going to make me feel bloated and gross the next day, and I don't care because that's
Yeah.
Halloween. So
Right.
we all have that thing, but I love it when new witches especially are get to experience October, that whole October thing, because it's like part of you is very mournful, and it's processing, and it's a lot of, if you're doing it right, in my opinion, right, there's a lot of that heaviness, which I
Right.
think is also why the revelry is so important, because the heaviness is there.
think that's actually a really compelling point. And I wish, if anything, what I took out of Samhain is I really hate the way that America celebrates Halloween
Mm,
because other cultures, I mean, Dia
right.
de los Muertos, like they figured it out.
Yeah, they figured it out.
They're doing it
Totally.
correctly, right?
Yeah,
But that's
absolutely.
not what Halloween is. Halloween is
Yeah,
jump scares. It's not like skulls, but also celebration and
exactly.
love. It's
No, it's
just like
trickery. Yeah, yeah,
fear,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
fear sucks. Fear
Yeah,
sucks.
yeah. It's fair. Yeah, absolutely. I love horror movies, but don't put me in one. Like
Mhm.
I'm totally with you on that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we get through. This is a really good book. I keep saying that because
Thanks.
well, this is the so one of the
You're
things that
making
I've
my
been
day.
doing, especially as I've just grown as a writer and as a witch, and I've put my own books out and dipped into other
Mhm.
types of writing and things. I've really have grown to appreciate authors who take time to sculpt their words the right way and to really convey something and to bring the reader in, and you do that in this really exciting. This is not like your average
Thank
book,
you.
people. You definitely want to go pick it up. Okay, so skimming through my notes here and your document, and where I want to hit so many things, but I'm looking at our time and like this is not going to happen. So
Yeah.
so let's get to day 100. So we
Okay.
get to this, and so you've out of your first 100 days, you have enough experience now, and if you're following along with the book, if you read the book, honestly, in your first 100 days, you probably get more experience than most people do in the first 2 years of their dipping into the craft. So
Mhm.
in a lot of ways, it was a crash course. At 100 days, as you were looking around you, looking at the last 100 days and the next 100 days, what were you thinking? Like, you're 100 days into this project. Is it worth it? Is it something that you wanted to continue, or were you getting nervous?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I'm trying to pull up my version of the PDF right now too, and I'm trying to remember where day 100 was. I'm guessing like November.
Yep, it's right after
Um,
Samhain.
oh, just right after Samhain. Okay,
Yep.
thank you. Thank you. Sorry. um, I was tired. I was tired. I was already tired. Well, Samhain happened, and then I mean, as I'm sure lots of folks in your audience probably know if they've ever had a profound Samhain ritual, which they probably have, um, then you do go into November like, oh, I'm really glad that everything is just about like blankets and tea right now. Okay, because you're emotionally drained. And then I also had I had a physical injury happen. So it was almost like what was going on with the seasons was something I just decided to embrace. I didn't push through the emotional processing I was doing. I didn't push through the physical pain I was feeling. I just went down and tried to think about these bigger things I was grappling with. And that's actually when the shadow work really started, and the white guilt processing and the ancestry processing. Although we don't talk about it a little bit until really I think January, but that is when it truly started. Um, and at the same time, I was switching over from Wicca to Witchcraft, and it just seemed like Witchcraft was so huge, and there were so many voices, and everyone was saying, "Do this, don't do that. Do this, don't do that." Well, if you do that, you're an idiot, or you're behind the times, or you're racist, or and you're going, "Okay, okay," and I'm just nodding, and I'm still not trusting my gut. I don't really trust my gut until I don't even know if I still do, to be perfectly blunt with you. Um, I don't think that actually started until February when somebody just really made it clear to me that I had been approaching the landscape entirely wrong. But around day 100, I think I wanted to stop. And if I hadn't been writing a book about it, I probably would have. If there wasn't literally money on the line at that point,
Mhm.
being really honest.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
I was like, this is actually too hard. And then I several times throughout the year I thought, I'm gonna write a book about this. Like, I don't want to write a book about who writes a book about their spiritual journey. This is a terrible idea. I'm gonna have no friends. I'm never gonna get laid again. Like my whole
Mhm.
life is gonna be over. You know.
They're just gonna Google you, and first thing that pops up is this,
Um,
right? Yeah, Yeah.
And that's before the
I
evangelicals come.
empathize. Yeah, I completely empathize. I had very similar, like, am I really going to do this? Because there goes
Yeah,
my professional career for the rest of my life. Yeah.
right.
Totally feel that. Totally feel that. So you, over the next, I'm like, I wish I could go month to month because there's so much good stuff to talk about. But over the next, like, we'll say 100 days,
Mhm.
you really, you do step into this in a way that is unique in that you go full head on into dealing with shadow work, into dealing with really heavy stuff that I think is honestly, it's the best part of the personal work of being a witch, is confronting these shadow parts of ourselves, because it is
Yeah.
therapy, right? The reason we do it is interesting, and we all come at it from a different perspective, and we're hoping to get something unique out of it. But
Mhm.
ultimately, it's about shaving away the bullshit to get to your power, right? And
Yeah.
integrating things so that you can step into who you need to be in this lifetime. And that is such a personal experience, and you go into great detail about what that was like. And so, again, people, if you're interested in kind of having a companion like through your own experience, you need to get this book. But I want to ask you, so we get to day 200, and now you've been doing this type of work, and you've entered this level of expectation and experience. How did things shift from day 100 to 200 for you? What was
Yeah.
important at 200 that wasn't important at 100?
It's also really, you gave a beautiful definition of shadow work, by the way. I wish I was still writing it. I would have quoted you on it. Um, I think by the time day 200 came around, I had a friend. Her name's Liza Rias. I go and visit her in Boston. She's, one of these witches whose mom was actually a witch. And um, we're doing an Imbolc ritual. And she turns to me and she says, I'm doing it wrong. And she says, you're not doing it wrong. You're doing it the way you felt called to do it. And I said, yeah, but it looks incorrect. And there was a craft involved, like an actual hand. Oh, I kind of still have the thing actually right here. But we're supposed to be doing St. Brigide's crosses, and I do something that looks like a Martha Stewart bondage death spell. And she just turns to me and she says, don't you understand? Like, haven't you figured this out yet? Why are you still trying to play by the rules? Like, you've been doing this long enough now. And this is something I was experiencing in August, where I realized I was just still too afraid to trust my gut, because I felt my gut would lead me astray, which is kind of the point of shadow work, I think, is being able to trust your gut and cleaning up the bad stuff that's there that you feel might lead you astray. So then you can actually trust your instincts a little bit harder. And that was really, really, really hard for me. I'm not even going to say that I am done with it or have achieved it. I still doubt a lot. And something I really did want out of this year is to become a more confident person, because I think a lot of witches are really confident. They're extremely confident people, and I envy it. I think a lot of people do envy it. That envy is expressed in a myriad of ways. And it was really hard for me to get there. I mean, I had to confront the fact that I thought hating religion is what made you smart, and then why I valued being smart, and then also, you know, how afraid I was about being racist on accident, like a lot of white fragility. I had to confront, I mean, and then yes, the basic stuff like trauma, like, oh, my dad and all of that. But in February, it started to feel, there were things that started to come up that were joyful. Um, some of these realizations were hard, but then you feel so much better once you've confronted them. And again, I wouldn't say I am now like a wholly actualized person who has no unresolved trauma and is fully healed and blah blah blah. But witchcraft does become therapy. I think you can be a Wiccan without doing any of this, because
Hmm.
Wicca is a religion and you can just go through the steps. That's not to say
Hmm.
that's Wiccans have no introspection. That is not what I'm saying. I'm just saying
Hmm.
you can just
It
follow
is a
Wicca.
requirement. Yeah.
Yeah, and never have to go deep. But when you're a witch, um, without that level of framework, the whole thing is basically shadow work and therapy. That's the whole
Hmm.
thing.
Hmm.
And it's religion. It becomes your personal spirituality.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
Did
I
that
feel
answer
that.
your question?
No,
Sorry.
100%. No,
Okay.
absolutely 100%. It's and again, I'm really just coming at this from a perspective of trying to find some commonality with those experiences and talk to somebody who is so open about them. So
Thanks.
you're
Yeah.
answering questions, absolutely, but you're also giving us a lot of personal insight. And again, I appreciate that.
Mm.
So you end up having closer towards like to the 200-ish day mark. You end up going to Europe. And I think
Yeah.
this is funny because, as we've talked about a couple of times, you're this white Anglo-Saxon lady
Mhm.
who, right, came looking for ancestral stuff, which we'll talk about in a little bit because I have a whole thing about that. But
Uh-huh.
but then you go to Europe and you get to, in a lot of ways, have a one-on-one experience with the original concepts that were reconstructed and then repackaged and fed
Mhm.
to you at one point, especially early on in your journey. So can we
Yeah.
talk about what that was like? What going from American
Oh my
paganism to
God.
going to Europe and seeing like real original paganism, I guess we'll call it.
What a great question. Well, there are two experiences that I'll share, and one is I went to the Atlantis bookshop because it was where Gerald Gardner had started, the so-called father of modern witchcraft. And so I go, well, yeah, there were a lot of things that happened in Europe, but I'll just talk about two. I went to the Atlantis bookshop, and I don't know if anyone listening has been there, but it 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 is very small. It's brightly colored. It almost looks like a little girl's bedroom, just crammed and crammed and crammed with books. Like basically, this is Belle's bedroom, like Princess Belle from Disney, because it's pastels and books everywhere. You can almost not walk. There's so many books, and it's beautiful. And the proprietors were so nice to me. I shook their hands briefly, but I went downstairs because it was just open, and nobody took me. I went downstairs and I'm looking around in this kind of dingy office. It's clean, but it's like warped and small and stuffy. And I'm like, what is this? And then I go to a corner and there's some relics there from when Gerald Gardner and his coven performed magic there. And the plaque says this is the room where they used to perform, to hold ritual. I shouldn't say perform, to hold ritual. And I was stunned. And I turned around again. I'm looking at the room with brand new eyes. And uh, I had a I had a lot of conflicting feelings about Gerald Gardner. Um, but I had a really weird moment where I felt a kind of an odd kinship with him because here he was practicing in this basement where he wouldn't be misunderstood, where he and his coven wouldn't be persecuted. Because when he was practicing, witchcraft literally was still illegal. I mean, it was like on the legal code as being something you can't do or it's punishable. Um, and at the time, my altar was on top of a cardboard box, which is a long story, and it's in the book if you want to know why. But uh, yeah, I had a really odd kinship with this idea of Gerald Gardner and just working with what you have, because I think most witches don't really have a dedicated space in their home. They don't have a full-time 9-foot circle altar. They work with what they have, where they can, when they can, where they won't be misunderstood, where people won't ogle them. I think most witches today, even though it's getting more and more popular and more normalized, I think that's a good thing. But you're still in a subculture where bad things could happen to you if the wrong people found out what you're doing. And I don't know. I had just a weird moment. I'm not going to say I saw his ghost, but I had just a weird moment of kinship through the ages where I felt a little bit connected with wanting to stay hidden and wanting to pull this beautiful thing out of the shadows, actually. But
Mm-hmm.
uh, and then I like cried at Stonehenge, which I was absolutely not expecting to do. I was like, it's going to be a bunch of rocks. And then I got there and I was like, oh my God, this is so profound. Like, I just lost my mind. Still can't really explain that. Maybe it was the power of persuasion, to be honest. it was intense. Stonehenge was weirdly intense. I didn't think I was going to have the reaction I had there, and it was very intense. Yeah.
I hear that a lot. I hear that a whole lot.
About Stonehenge
Yeah,
specifically?
Stonehenge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, dude, those big rocks are
There's
weird.
something to it.
There's
Yeah,
something to it.
And there's a lot of like stuff going on underneath those rocks that I think
Yeah.
also make those rocks feel the way they do.
Mhm.
Okay, so one of the things that when I was reading this, because we've been talking for a couple of months back and forth via email. Thank you for your patience, by the way. When I was reading this, so two things went through my mind. The first thing was that, actually three things. And I'll be honest. First thing was I felt really bad for you. And the reason why was because it seemed like the path that you were taking was very windy and confusing. Only from the perspective of like, oh, if I wish she would have read this book, or that she could have heard this podcast, or, and that would have solved this chunk of the books, whatever. So there was that part of just like, oh, there was another part of me that felt bad because you jumped in during one of the most chaotic times in our contemporary movement. The pandemic was horrible for the Wiccan community, the pagan community. And it was only because we had this influx of people who did not know what was going on and did not understand who we were come in all of a sudden because they had all this free time and they were bored. Right. And it was hard. It was really hard. And people were writing books that we find out they're actually AI writing books. A lot of really creepy stuff was going on, and people didn't even know if authors were even real people. Like, it was very scary. There was a lot of talk about, of course, cultural appropriation and racism. And you could not go into, during the pandemic period, you could not go into a pagan or occult space and not run into some sort of controversy, some sort of hot topic button issue, to the point where like I quit posting. I just didn't want to be jumping into it because I was like, this isn't good. It's also discussions that we've had countless times over and over again. And now, because we have these new people, we're having them again in these very big ways. And none of the original, it was just a whole mess. So I felt bad because I was like, we're not at our best right now. Like, it wasn't like inviting company to come over when the house was a mess, right? And we haven't had time to do the dishes and things like that. So I was like, ugh, and reading it, and even just like the authors and the people that you reference and stuff, it's like really clear that TikTok, right, was something that you were watching. So that was something that like everybody who wasn't on TikTok hated TikTok. Like, we hated TikTok for what it was doing. And there was it was just drama all the time. And people saying, you're doing this wrong. And blah. So I felt bad because it was like, she came into witchcraft during the TikTok era of like drama and insanity and stuff. Did any of that, like, so you come on, you're just trying to find order. You're just trying, right? You were trying to find that living God inside yourself, right? So when you go into an online space and it's like that negative and it's that difficult to navigate through, what was that like as an outsider coming in? Like, did you feel at home? Did you feel like you were able to find the places that you needed? Like, honestly, like, because this is something that was really bothering me the entire time it was happening. So I want to know what your experience was.
Well, yeah, I mean, when we started the book, we all thought COVID was going to be over at the end of 2021. COVID was not supposed to be a character in the book. I was supposed to be going to, anyway, the year was supposed to look a lot different than it actually did because of COVID. And then to answer your question more directly, I mean, yeah, I confronted a lot of stuff that kind of offended me and bothered me. And I didn't want to ignore it because I felt new, but eventually I got to a place where I thought, I just don't need that kind of anger. There was a lot of anger. And then I realized, this is to be a little bit glib. So I grew up with sisters. I have two sisters. And I really think witchcraft is a perfect example of a sisterhood. And I kind of make this joke in the book because it's like people who are really angry at each other, calling each other's names, stealing each other's stuff, telling each other they're idiots, and then lending each other power and light 10 minutes later and fighting for the same cause. There has never been a better example of sisterhood than that, because that is I think what sisterhood is like. You guys are at each other's throats, and you would also, you would kill for each other. I think witches have always disagreed with each other about certain aspects because so many parts of witchcraft are new. They are constantly being figured out. They're every single piece of the spirituality is up for debate and has an argument for or against it, right? And that is maddening. And that's also why at a certain point I realized I was going to have to be really methodical about who I read and why I was reading them and who I stuck to and who I didn't. And if I let them go, why did I let them go? But I personally liked Witch Talk because, I mean, that's just everything. And there's a lot of stuff where you can kind of tell people they're just pandering, they're being theatrical. It's TikTok, Mostly I focused on the books because I think when someone sits down and writes a whole book, they are just going to be more genuine. It's not a cheap thrill. They're putting their name on it. You know how to find them. They spent a really long time working through something and putting thought into something. TikTok is not that. I love TikTok. I'm obsessed with TikTok. I have a TikTok. Please follow me on TikTok if you have one. Let's be friends. But it's Twinkies versus a 3-course meal with like a salad and a meat and a dessert. But more to your point, I don't know. I feel like I don't want to discount your experience, but I also feel like witches have always been fighting, haven't they? Isn't this like?
Not like
I think we just
this is a
more,
totally this is a totally different. It was
it
unseen,
was
and we
worse.
were all like, "What the hell are
Yeah.
we gonna do?" Yeah, and it shut down like people who had been around for 50 years. It just shut them down because they weren't about to deal with 17,000 17-year-olds telling them that they were a racist, and they're like, "Well, can you explain?" No, you should know better. You should do better. It was a lot of that anger. It was literally anger. And so
anger.
the angry part of the community was 1000% driven by TikTok. And so, and it's because it was the TikTok videos that would get shared on the other platforms that would stir all the stuff. So it was always coming from TikTok. And we all, like, on Facebook, Twitter, all the other social platforms, we would just see a TikTok video come up and we would just shut it down because we just knew, like, this is going to be a thing. There are, not to say that there aren't good, because there's great people on TikTok. Don't get me wrong. Like, oh my goodness, my husband's on TikTok. My bestest friends are on TikTok. Some of my great author friends are on. It's not that necessarily like the authors and stuff. Like, I like that when you say you stuck to the books. Very
Thorn
important.
Mooney's is
very
great.
Important.
I love her.
Thorn Mooney's the shit.
Yeah.
Thorn Mooney's the shit. I love Thorn Mooney. Yeah. No, it's the like 17-year-olds that are like cursing the moon and trying to cancel Poseidon and stuff like that. It's just like, what does this even, like, this isn't who we are. It's just, it was a bad representation of those of us who'd been around for so long, who had been trying to be taken seriously, to have that level of anger and rage brewing and a part of the scene that came up over nowhere, like out of nowhere overnight. We just didn't know what was going on. We didn't know who these people were who were getting upset. And a lot of the times we'd find out, oh, they are a fake person, or they've created, like this happened a lot, especially in the beginning, completely fake identities just to go in and crazy stuff. So TikTok became this very unreliable place for a lot of things, but it was good for the visualization of a lot of those memes that are important. You know, a lot of this, especially during the pandemic, was really, really, because there were people coming, right? So you did have hungry people. And they wanted to eat. So where are they going to go get some food? Right? Yeah, absolutely. And as long as it leads people to wherever the hell they need to go in life, it don't matter to me. So I don't have any skin in the game. But it was definitely one of those. I was worried about, like, just new people coming in and then thinking that that's who we were. Like that behavior, that attitude was just rampant in the community. And it's not. No. We will argue over philosophy and things like that from time to time in the community. You get a lot of that, especially like, you read anything that was written by like Blavatsky and anybody in that era, they will argue with each other in the forewords to their books. Like they'll say, well, he thinks it's this, but I think it's like, there's a lot of that stuff. So, but it's always, I love the way that you refer to it as a sisterhood, because there is a lot of that. Like, everyone can be, no one can be mean to you, but I can be mean to you because I'm your sister, and but I got your back. And it is like that. And that is something that, especially as the dust settles after the pandemic, people who have found a home are staying. There's a lot more of that. And that's what we want to celebrate, because that's the
Mhm.
stuff that helps everyone feel like, even though we're not necessarily, on the same boat, that we're at least headed in the same direction and we're all part of the
Right.
same caravan. And that to me is important when we don't have structured religion and we don't have those things. All we
Yeah.
have is each other. So
Right.
I really, really love your book. I really love your book.
Thank you.
Let me ask you this.
Uh-huh.
So we get through to the end of everything.
Uh-huh.
It's been 365 days
Uh-huh.
of magic. Did you feel, A, that you found that living God inside yourself at the end of those 365? Let me ask you that.
Ooh. I've never heard it phrased like that, actually. I yes. Did I find her? Them, honestly, yes. Uh, are we best buds? Probably not yet, but like definitely met
Yeah.
them, touched them.
Do you
Yeah.
feel like, had you, I don't know, not gone into witchcraft, maybe you would have gone into like Buddhism, or you would have gone into another fringe religious or spiritual practice? Do you feel
Right.
like you would have been able to find the same answers?
Um, I just think it would have been completely different. Well, because witchcraft has
Mhm.
that. I love how you say that living God inside of you. And I my understanding of other religions is that that isn't as big of a concept. So I think if I had gone whole ham into Buddhism, no, I don't think so. I like to think maybe I'd be a little more blissed out. Um,
A little more zen, maybe. Yeah.
because at some point, I mean, and I'll share this too. Part of being honest in the book was at one point, witchcraft increased my anxiety in a lot of ways. It did not
Hmm.
bring it down; it brought it up,
Right.
and I had to deal with that
Yeah.
rapidly. But that's a whole other story. I think one thing it did do is I became more. And I hate this phrase. I just hate what I'm about to say out loud. I just haven't found better phrasing for it. Um, easier for me to plug myself into the flow of the universe. I still
Hmm.
can't really say that without wanting to gag, but and that
I
is
just say tune in. I
tune,
just
yeah,
say tune in, and that's that way we can resolve a lot of awkwardness that way.
and that is, and I really believe if you do that
Hmm.
thoughtfully and give yourself actual time for it, that is an ecstatic thing to do. Like,
Hmm.
actually, and I use the word ecstatic very thoughtfully. I think that is
Yeah.
an ecstatic thing to do, and it's something I still do. It's something I look forward to doing. It really is like getting high on life.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
so that's yeah.
Yeah.
But that doesn't feel like the God inside of me necessarily. That feels more like witnessing the universe and just being in awe
Mm.
of it. And it also shrinks your problems. And I'm a person who enjoys that feeling.
Yeah.
I know some people hate that feeling. I actually like to lean into it. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of awesome stuff that we didn't get to talk about. We didn't talk about your experience at Witch Camp. That was another thing I wanted. I'm like, you went from extreme to extreme to extreme.
yeah,
Like reclaiming is amazing, but you
they're
went to a witch
amazing.
camp. Like, oh my
They're
gosh.
amazing.
So there's a lot of incredible good stuff in this book. I very much enjoyed reading it. And
Thanks.
it's something that there's another book, which is in America, by Alex Marr, that has a similar vibe. Yours
Yeah,
feels a lot more open to the experience, and it feels a lot more embracing of the individual experiences that you went through as you were studying, and and you shared that information, and I really appreciate that.
yeah,
But if you want to sort of compare anything outside of it, it'd be kind of close to that ish. But a lot more. And I love Alex, but there's a lot more heart in this than there was
yeah,
journalism, and I like that. So I definitely appreciate that aspect of it. If
yeah,
we want to find you online, if we want to stalk you on these socials, where are we going to go?
yeah. I am my I'm having the most fun on TikTok. Um, You can look up my name, Diana Helmuth, or I think I'm at Def Not Lost, which is short for Definitely Not Lost, which is who I am on Instagram. Definitely
Okay.
Not Lost. And I am on Twitter/X, but like, is anyone still? But I am
Yeah, it's
there.
awkward.
Definitely Not Lost. But yeah, Instagram and TikTok. I would love to be friends with more witches in the community. And I mean, I'm still a relatively new author. And if anyone reads this book and wants to tell me what they really thought about it, especially if they're a witch who went on their own similar journey, please DM me or email me. I would actually really love to hear. This is an intensely personal topic for most people,
Mm.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
I like hearing about other people's journeys. I really do. I really do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So TikTok. So you're over on the TikToks. What's your website?
DianaHelmuth.com. Which,
DianaHelmuth.com.
yeah, the
Easy
last
enough.
name is like, should I spell it? um,
It's right. It's HELMUTH, and
yeah,
it is pronounced Helmuth. And there you go.
yeah,
Right.
DianaHelmuth.com. And the book is The Witching Year.
The Witching Year, and it's available. It's pre-ordering right now, right? Because it's just about to drop. Yeah.
Yes.
Very exciting. Are you going to do anything for the release?
I have some events booked in the San Francisco Bay Area at the beginning of October, and one in Seattle on October 12th, and possibly a few more. But I'm going to be posting those up on my website pretty soon. So if you live in the Bay Area or the Seattle area, come say hi, please.
Come say hi. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Diana. I really appreciate your time coming on Modern Witch. And I hope that you'll come back and we can talk more about this, because this was, again, it's a really heartfelt book. It was something that I had a hard time putting down. I really enjoyed being there with you as you took this journey into witchcraft, because again, it's this heartfelt, open, honest study of what a lot of people experience when they first step in, and that's just a really beautiful thing. It's honest. I can't say that enough, right? Like it's a good, honest piece of work that I think anybody, I'm gonna give it to people when they're like, I don't know if I want to become read this book. Here's this book that will help give you some perspective, and that's a fantastic thing. So thank you so much. All right, everybody. We will be back next week with with Nicholas Pearson. We're going to be talking about Carnelian, I believe. So stay tuned, stay around, check you out on Modern Witch. Thank you so much.